So congratulations on the film. I saw it the other day.
Thank
Um,
you.
I think it shows that it took 5 years because it's very rich, and you got great personalities that represent the LGBT community in Japan. Could you tell us why did you dedicate so much time to this topic?
Yeah, so Queer Japan is my first feature-length documentary. And when I started it, I didn't really anticipate it unfolding into a 4 or 5 year process. But there were so many interviews that we did during our initial production that it created this amazing gold mine of treasure in terms of interviews. And we were just trying to figure out how it all could fit together into the format of a feature film. So the post-production process was pretty complicated, and during that time we also conducted like a few more interviews. So it all just it took longer to unfold than I expected, but taking on a big subject like Queer Japan, it kind of makes sense that it's not going to be a quick and easy thing.
Everybody seemed, all the participants seemed like very happy to have this platform to express and to let us know who they are and what their life looks like. Was it something not easy, but did you feel welcome?
Yeah, I was really amazed by how welcoming so many of our subjects were and how open they were willing to be with us and share their stories on camera. Not everyone we approached for an interview said yes and wanted to be in a movie called Queer Japan. And I totally understand that and didn't want to like force anybody or pressure anyone into participating if they didn't feel comfortable. And so as a result, I feel like the people who ended up in the film are the people who were intended to be in the film, the people who embraced its ideas. And you can see a sort of rapport between us, and I have to credit a lot of that to my producer Hiromi Ida. She is this amazing filmmaker in Tokyo who has been making short documentaries in the drag scene for a while. So she had a lot of connections already and just has a great way of putting people at ease.
How tolerant is the Japanese society with people who are different from the mainstream?
Yeah, it's a big question. I feel oh sorry, let me let me try to include that in the answer. Yeah, I think it's hard to compare the level of tolerance between Japan and other countries because it can be so varied depending on place and what part of society you're in. But I think in general, there has been a sort of don't ask, don't tell atmosphere surrounding sexuality for a while. And a lot of that has to do with the lack of non-discrimination protections for LGBT people in Japanese law on a national level. So for people who may be out in their personal lives and have a partner and go out and enjoy the nightlife, they still might be closeted at work because there's no protection against being fired because of your sexuality.
Wow, I didn't know that. Could you comment the concept of hentai? I think it's interesting because it defines many things, I guess.
Yeah, so there's this term hentai, which I think some people in the West may be familiar with in the context of anime or manga. And it has connotations of strangeness, weirdness. So it is somewhat similar to queer in certain ways, but it has a life of its own. And it was interesting to talk to some people who actually embraced this term, despite it being kind of like a negative connotation in a lot of people's minds. So we interviewed Buto dancer Atsushi Matsuda, and he's somebody who just really enjoys being himself and standing out. He has face tattoos and just isn't fazed by other people's judgments. So he really likes the word hentai as this sort of umbrella term for any kind of gender or sexuality that doesn't fit within the norm.
And I love the Gay Pride in Tokyo. I would love to go there. I was in Tokyo, but it was not Gay Pride, but it's a big event, right? Can you talk a little about shooting the Gay Pride and how did you feel?
Yeah, it was really amazing to film at Tokyo Rainbow Pride. It's been going on for about 10 years in the current iteration. There were earlier LGBT Pride parades that didn't quite become like a regular thing or didn't survive after a few years. But Tokyo Rainbow Pride has been steadily growing over the past decade, and every year there are more people participating. Hundreds of thousands show up now. So it's really encouraging to see the movement sort of like find its voice and find this way to be visible within mainstream society.
Some of the guests in your documentary are very artistic, and they explore sexuality in their society and they create art. I thought that was very unique. Could you talk about the sense of the artists that represent the LGBT community? Or are they representing themselves? I don't know if they have the sense of belonging to a community or if they're individuals.
Yeah, I think it differs for each of them, but just in general, I think one of the reasons that Queer Japan focuses on artists in addition to activists, politicians, and other people who are like on the front lines of LGBT community progress is that art and culture, it has an impact on those things. It has a way of making us understand the world from a different perspective. So including someone like Gengaro Tagame, he is a very singular artist. He's not making work to represent any community, really. He just wants to put out his desires in his gay manga, which are usually very erotic and have BDSM themes. So it's not the type of work that he is doing to like find a mainstream audience, and yet he has amassed this great following from people who just love his work and his style. So I think that's an example of how like being an individual within a scene can actually influence people and open their minds to new ideas and new ways of being in the world.
I read several reviews to your film and they're very positive. How satisfying is that for you?
It is very satisfying to see the film being enjoyed by critics and audiences. Now that it's out in the world, it's been a long process getting it made. So I'm really grateful we've been getting mostly positive reviews. And I think it was never quite clear to a lot of people who the audience is for Queer Japan. But to me, the audience is just everybody. I want everyone to be able to watch this film and sort of take something away from it, take on a fresh understanding of an issue they hadn't thought about, or just learn some of who these amazing people are. So I'm just hopeful that audiences will continue to discover Queer Japan.
I do think that Japan in general has this for people in the West, like we're very curious about Japanese culture, and I think this is a tribute to Japanese culture too, in a way.
Yeah, so there's definitely both of those things. I kind of approached Queer Japan coming in as a fan of a very specific form of artwork in Japanese queer culture, and that is the gay manga artwork of Gengaro Tagame and other artists who contributed to his magazine G-Men. So that was kind of like my otaku obsession with like a very specific form of Japanese culture. And then once I started getting to know these artists and actually spending time with them in Japan, I started to see how much more there was, how like broad and diverse the queer community in Japan was. So I feel like having that experience sort of opened my mind wider, and I started to see just like how multifaceted queer culture was in this place. And I wanted to share that with audiences who might not be familiar with some of these people and ideas.